Elizabeth Warren. She just wants to be, the crusader against corruption. But what she's really doing, as I've reported, Status Coup has reported for months, is she's basically delegating the corruption to her assistants and her staff and her top level finance people. You do the dirty work of dealing with the donors so I could say I'm clean, but make sure we get their money. This is basically what Elizabeth Warren is doing. I hate to give credit to Politico, but where it is warranted, I will. Inside Warren's secret big donor fan club. Elizabeth Warren prohibits special access for big donors, but her campaign treasurer, who, by the way, her campaign treasurer was once called what was he called? A walking Pac-Man. A walking Pac-Man because of his fundraising prowess for super PACs. Her campaign treasurer and another close ally are organizing wealthy supporters for Warren behind the scenes while she rips on the rich. The pair, Paul Eagerman, who's wealthy, and activist Shanti Fry, have maintained campaign titles as Warren's finance co-chairs, even as her campaign shared other links to Democratic donor class earlier this year, foreshadowing closed-door in-person fundraising events of the sort Warren did for years in the Senate. Fry and Eagerman, a longtime friend of Warren's who helped build support for her first run for office, are courting big donors in the Northeast by organizing trips, hosting events, and acting as conduits for information about the campaign. Eagerman and Fry recently planned excursions, oh boy, to Warren's 20,000-person rally in New York City and to the Iowa Democratic Party's Liberty and Justice celebration in the first caucus state. According to people familiar with the trips, Fry solicits donations from supporters as well, one Boston friend said. Their presence on Warren's unorthodox campaign shows how the Massachusetts senator, whose campaign is funded primarily by small-dollar online donors and who rails against the corrosive influence of political donors and Wall Street billionaires, even selling a campaign mug labeled Billionaire Tears, is not completely blowing up her ties to the Democratic establishment. Well, that's one way of writing it, Politico. And the wealthy supporters Eagerman and Fry are organizing today may have another act to play in Warren's campaign. If she became the nominee, those donors may help finance the National Democratic Party, which can collect six-figure sums, and which Warren has said she would raise money for if chosen as the nominee, or help super PACs that would support Warren against President Trump. And their efforts highlight how some wealthy donors, especially progressives in her Boston base, have continued to embrace Warren, undaunted by the calls for a wealth tax and Medicare for all that have recently prompted furious criticisms. I'm going to skip down and get to what I think is the most important point. Warren's campaign declined to answer questions from Politico about whether the campaign has paid for any travel for Eagerman or Fry or for the donors on trips that the finance co-chairs have organized to early voting states and other Warren events. Well, silence is often the answer, folks. Silence is often the answer. So I don't even know where to begin. Let's begin with what we already knew. Obviously, the New York Times several weeks ago. When was this from? This was from August, actually. They reported that Elizabeth Warren herself was going around the country and having hot tea with a who's who of the Democratic Party establishment to basically curry favor. I think possibly because she might think, and her team might think, we might be looking at a potential brokered convention, and it might go to the second ballot where superdelegates vote. So Warren's team has been trying to court those bigwigs of the Democratic Party establishment, and as they said in this article, she is in phone calls, text messages, and small gatherings before her rallies, as well as in one-on-one meetings over hot tea at her Washington condominium. Miss Warren is simultaneously courting and assuring Democratic town leaders, statewide officials, and the chiefs of the country's largest unions. So, Elizabeth Warren, essentially, from the reporting in Politico, the New York Times, and now we see her moonwalking on Medicare for all. Let's be very clear. this transition that she came out with, which I reported on last week, it's not a transition. It's a moonwalk. It's an about face. It is, I'm going to first enact a public option within 100 days, which she makes seem like that's just some easy thing to do, that the public option is so easy. Yeah, snap my fingers, we're going to have a public option in 100 days, I believe she said. She's going to use some jujitsu of executive action and other things. And then as we transition and people get the benefits of the public option, then we're going to make the case for Medicare for all in my third year, after a potential Democratic Party loss in the midterms in 2022, and a year before she would be up for re-election. That's when she's going to fight for Medicare for all. Are we, cynical YouTubers here, supposed to believe that as Warren goes around with her big structural change, as Warren goes around talking about billionaire tiers, but delegates her top finance people in her campaign to, they didn't deny it, so we have to assume, according to the Political report, that they are paying for top wealthy donors to fly into certain events? Are we to assume that her softening, shall we say, in terms of positioning on Medicare for all in particular, has no relation to her, well, not her, but her donor, her top campaign staff, currying favor and basically behind the scenes kissing the ring of top Democratic Party donors? And for the devil's advocates out there that say, well, Jordan, Bernie Sanders didn't do this in 2016 and he lost. He didn't curry favor with the Democratic Party. He didn't sit and have hot tea with the Democratic Party's who's who. He didn't work hard enough to try and get Democratic Party establishment to sign on as superdelegates to him. He didn't play the game, and he lost. Well, to that, we say Bernie Sanders was enormously outspent by Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders had a skeleton crew as his staff for the most part. His staff this time around is much more expansive and much more staffed up than in 2016. And Bernie Sanders spent more time doing rallies, grassroots support, small dollar fundraisers, and he won 22 states. And he created a political revolution that many would argue established the conditions for someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to run and win, and other progressives to run and compete. And he was cheated. Elizabeth Warren is basically trying a magic trick. I'm pure. I don't waste time placating and kissing the ring of Democratic Party donors. I don't do big lavish fundraisers, although she did during her 2018 Senate re-election, and then she transferred those funds over into her presidential campaign. Elizabeth Warren says that, and it's true. It's just that basically she's just outsourcing it to her campaign staff to do it. And this is problematic. This is problematic for obvious reasons. First off, she's been on every single side of the fence when it comes to, will she take big money in the general election? First it was, I'm not going to unilaterally disarm. Then she said, I'm not going to take their money. Then she said, well, I'm not going to personally take their money, but I will fundraise with those same people for the DNC during the general election. And wait, who's the DNC going to be spending money for in the general election if Warren was the candidate? She's basically trying a lot of jujitsu, magic tricks. But the bottom line is, you are who you surround yourself with. And if your campaign run by a very, very wealthy man, Paul Eagerman, on the finance side, is flying in wealthy people, she ain't flying in me. She ain't flying in you. She's flying in wealthy folk to watch her on stage say she's taking on those wealthy folk. And I want to be clear. Not all wealthy people are terrible. There are wealthy, capital P, progressives out there. But from the reporting, she's not going around trying to get Ben and Jerry's money, who are obviously Bernie supporters. She's trying to get money from the billionaire class. And that is troublesome. Because if she's doing this, all these tricks now, what is she going to do if she's elected president? Is she going to go around saying, I don't take the big money, but have her chief of staff do it? Is she going to say, I don't do lavish fundraisers, but have her treasury secretary do it, or her vice president do it? The only thing that happens, look at the cause and effect. Politico is reporting her top donors, her top campaign people are basically flying in wealthy people to events and playing liaison to these big wealthy people. And as that happens, she suddenly, it was I'm with Bernie, now it's we have a transition for Medicare for all. I'm going to give you a public option within the first 100 days. Triangulate and then some. And you know what? I heard somebody, maybe it was The Hill, Crystal and Sajer. I always mispronounce it. I think it's Sajer's show that said this, and I thought it was a great way of saying it. Thank you for the super chat. Her heart is clearly not into Medicare for all. Her heart is clearly, she might think, long-term universal health care is a good thing, but it's not what she wants. It's not her core issue. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.